anxiety disorders and trauma and stress-related disorders. They're all kind of a cluster of things, and we'll look at how the DSM-5 categorizes those. The presentations today are very descriptive. Mostly you have to understand what they look like and you have to know the criteria. So this is the beginning of our second week of psych. I think you're figuring out that part of the game in psychiatry is just knowing what to call something, and that you have to know how to call it based on the criteria. And they are not lab diagnosed disorders, they are descriptive diagnoses, and if they fit all the elements, then you can call it a certain thing. I think a general thing too that you've seen for all of these is that the DSM-5 almost always says not caused by another psychiatric disorder, doesn't have the elements of those, and is not related to the effects of a substance, some chemical that somebody might be using, and is not related to some other medical disorder. So you got to rule out medical disorders, rule out substance use, rule out other psychiatric diagnoses to kind of land on what you're going to land on. A lot of your, not all of them, but there will be some, and if you looked at your objectives, I've been writing it this way, that given a clinical scenario, you need to be able to select out a diagnosis listed, and that is a huge part of it. Therapy, for a lot of these things, is not as well known as you would like to think, especially for the things today. They're not really, they are drug therapy things really kind of in support, and there are other therapeutic approaches that are used for these things. So you will know what you need to know about the drugs. I'm not going into the detail of those drugs every single time we talk about them, but you're beginning to understand what the categories and classes are. And tomorrow at 10, after we've got all of this on the table, as well as personality disorders, and Dr. Latassi will talk a lot about the medicine for anxiety type disorders, then I think by that point you'll have had every medication that you need to know in relationship to mental health disorders, and then we'll kind of go from there. So it's just kind of a different type of a module. I mean, a lot of others you're worried about diagnostic tests, when you get them, how to rule things out objectively, and here you can objectively rule things out. It's just a different type of a game. So please spend your time studying the criteria, because you do have to know them. And I've been trying to highlight durations and effect on function, and there's key little symptoms that will pop up too that will help you also know how to deal with it. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Any questions from y'all about what's been covered so far up to this point? Is it pretty straightforward? It's pretty straightforward. I mean, but you do have to read it. I think the trick with psych gets to be when you start adding in a whole bunch of them, they all kind of start to blur. They all have some anxiety component. They may have some behavioral aspect that repeats itself over and over again. So you'll have to read and study and sort so that when you see a scenario, you'll be better positioned for it. But of course, it's not trick stuff either. You study for the odd things about the diagnosis, study for the duration aspects, and then those will help you sort it out. Okay? I think y'all do fine. Okay, so let's look at anxiety disorders. Okay, very common. I suspect there's a good bit of anxiety in this program, because I think your program is very rapid and it jams a lot of stuff down, and you kind of have to stay on top of stuff all the time, and you can get anxious, you can get behind, and if you come into a lecture one day and they bomb you with just tons of materials, like there's an anxiety that goes with that. So it's ordinary to live, to have anxiety about things, but when that anxiety becomes large and begins to make you unable to function every day, then you start moving into disease classifications of that. It's very common in primary care practice. You're going to have anxiety every day. People are sick or not calm and relaxed for the most part. They're usually worried about something. They get anxious. So it'll be a baseline thing you'll see. But is it a diagnosis that requires therapy? That's the trick. Do you need to do anything with it despite that? It's often underdiagnosed and often undertreated. I could say in some parts of Oklahoma it might be overtreated because you've got such a proliferation of psychoactive drugs, in this state. And this is not intended to be negative or sniping Oklahoma, because I know a lot of your Oklahomans. Oklahoma as a state tends to like to use drugs. I mean, drug therapy is prescription ends the visit. People come, they want a drug, they want to feel different. And prescribing patterns here tend to be more heavily oriented towards drug therapies than even in other states. So just know that you're in a culture that favors that, and the population actually kind of demands it. It's kind of like, what do you do? What do they expect? So it's out there. So in the nation, it's underdiagnosed and undertreated. I'm not sure I would say that for this state. Somatization is another part of it too, where there's lots of physical symptoms that come from stress. And a lot of times people will come in complaining of physical symptoms, but really the problem is the stress in their life, and you'll be asked to sort that out. Some of the statistics here, there are two big data sources that come out periodically, that National Comorbidity Study and then the Epidemiological Catchment Area Study. They come out at various times, and they kind of do the canvas of the whole world, you know, at least in the United States, to try to come up with what psychiatric disorders are out there. Anxiety disorders are the most common diagnostic group. When you put together all the things we're going to look at today, and you go to the general population, it's a big group of disorders. Some of these prevalence figures estimated 15 to 25% in everybody's life at some point in time. Panic disorder, you know, that's 1 in 50. Generalized anxiety disorder, 4 to 6, that's 1 in 20. Obsessive compulsive disorder is a lot more common than you might think, 2.3 to 2.6. We all have little elements. Most good students in programs like this have elements of obsessive compulsive behavior, or they would not have succeeded. It's just when it starts to invade your psyche that it becomes a disease. And then social phobia, that's pretty high. You know, not wanting to be around people for fear of ridicule or being embarrassed in some way. Okay. Epidemiology, and we're talking about stress disorders collectively, so this is like the big set of numbers. We'll get into specific diagnoses here in a second. There's no really difference in racial distinctions with panic disorders and one. Male to female ratios for any tends to lean towards women, 3 to 2, 2 to 1, kind of looking at the stats. There's a good number I'll look at that are just 50-50 between the sexes, but there's some that tend to orient towards women a little bit more. Most anxiety disorders pick up somewhere in childhood, adolescence, or early adulthood. Whatever it is that's going to freak you out or bother you, it begins to show itself fairly early. So it's really unusual to have a lot of these diagnoses when you're 80, you know, 60, 70, or 80, because your adaptive abilities have usually been expressed some way. You know, just living, you get stressed. And so if you have that tendency, then it will show up. A lot of morbidity and mortality with anxiety disorders. Suicide is one. I mean, if you don't like being stressed all the time, one way is just to get off the planet, okay? And so that happens for people. High rate of comorbidity, alcohol and drug abuse. I hear this from patients all the time. They drink beer, they drink alcohol, they take some medications, legal, illegal, whatever, just to kind of chill because they want to regulate their feeling, how they're feeling on that day. It's a real temptation. You know, we had the addiction medicine thing on Friday. A lot of stuff there. I tried to whittle it down with y'all's objectives, but a lot of good information about how dependencies come about psychologically. So, of course, there's tendencies and genetic predispositions too, but then if you're in an environment and you get stressed enough, you may choose ways out. So and then if you are predisposed to addiction, then you end up with it. So stress and anxiety can precipitate behaviors. And then there's the increased risk of cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. You know, you've seen people who get stressed in your families and they die very shortly after that, like one spouse dies and then the other one dies from either grief or anxiety or being alone or things like that. So it's not unusual to see greater rates of cardiovascular disease. Okay, we have to distinguish fear and anxiety. Okay, they are kind of related, but they're kind of not. And when you do psych, they think about it like this. If I just throw them out there and not get into like the clinical definition of them, it's easy to kind of mismatch things and not have clarity. Fear, okay, fear is a response. That's an emotional response to a real or perceived imminent threat. Okay, somebody's coming at you with a knife pulled out. Okay, that's a fear reaction that's going to come up. Or let's say that somebody has pulled up in the driveway in a car and you're afraid it's your ex-husband, if you're a woman, and that they have told you they were going to kill you. Okay, there, as soon as you hear that, that's fear. That's a reaction starts to happen. That's perceived, but you think that that's what it is. Okay, the threat is usually external and it's usually definite. Okay, so that's fear. It's something out there for real. Fear helps us. It kind of warns us that we could get bodily harm, murder, pain could be on its way, punishment could come its way, or even helplessness. Here's how the helplessness, like where does that come from? Let's say that you are about to lose your job and you have tons and tons of bills that require steady income. Okay, if you lose your job, then that fear is a sense of helplessness because you would be dependent and could be in the street. Bad things can happen. And I know some of you often have probably had that anxiety, where am I going to get enough money to make it to the next month? And it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to be there because it's a helplessness. Fear is associated with autonomic surges, which I think those are lots of the physical symptoms that you see. Fight or flight. If somebody's coming with a knife, I'm gonna be moving, thinking. I'm heightened awareness. I'm ready to defend myself. And it's intended to help you escape, get away, defend self. Now, anxiety is a little bit different. Anxiety is anticipating something, thinking to the future and anticipating something. Okay? The threat is usually internal, kind of vague, maybe even unknown, but you're thinking to the future and something bad could happen, and I'm worrying about it. Now, it may never happen. I tell my son all the time, he's worried about it, so it's like, listen, I have found as life goes by that the things I worried about 95% plus of the time, it never came true anyway. So you just waste all this time worrying and anxious when it never is going to happen anyway. Learning how to live well in the moment is a trick. It's not something I can just give to you. You kind of have to figure it out for yourself. But that anxiety is of some vague threat out there that could come and get me somewhere at some point in time. Anxiety usually associated with muscle tension and vigilance. For some of those stress headaches, those tension headaches, it's just the muscle band tightens up, you just get worried or anxious and it spreads. There's usually also vigilance. When you think something's coming, you just kind of can't quite settle down, kind of worried about something, jumpy. And a person who has anxiety may take on a lot of avoidance behaviors. Don't go places where you think something will happen. Don't talk to folks who you think are going to do something to you that you're worried about. So those are some distinctions. So fear, real or perceived for good reason. Anxiety is somewhere in the future something could happen. So there's that moment in the moment versus down the road. Present versus future. Present, fear, future, anxiety. Okay? Let's look at the classifications. There's a bunch. I took these straight out of DSM-5 just so you can see what the range of diagnoses are. We aren't going to cover every diagnosis in DSM-5. You would go nuts. I mean, we would all have a disorder by the end of that. We were really out there. So I picked out some of the big ones. So, and these are ordered, and DSM-5 orders them as they developmentally appear. So the first was separation anxiety disorder. If any of your mothers, you know how your children cling sometimes when you're leaving them. Worst thing in the world, go to daycare or preschool for the first time. And you take your child there, and then they start crying when you get ready to go. Oh, it kills you. I mean, it's just terrible. Kira's kind of like, see you later, don't act like you know me. That was at a certain age, but when they're little, you just don't know. The separation anxiety disorder. There's a thing called selective mutism where people don't speak. They just get shut down, and they won't interact. Specific phobia, we'll look at that. Snakes, spiders. Social anxiety disorder, also called social phobia. Panic disorder, agoraphobia, we've all heard that, afraid to go out amongst people in various ways. Generalized anxiety disorder, maybe the biggest diagnosis you'll see in medical records in life if you go long enough. And then substance and medication-induced anxiety disorder, and then anxiety disorder due to another medical condition. DSM-5 has something to describe everything, so there's always a catch-all at the end. Okay, let's look at general considerations for anxiety. It's just, again, we're still talking broad, we haven't gotten down to an individual diagnosis. But pathophysiology, it's a combination. These, you don't get clean pathophysiology with these mental disorders like you would like. Some we know more than others. Our presenter on Friday gave a lot of detail about addiction and what we know about that. We know a lot, but a lot we don't know. Sleep, a lot we know about that, a lot we don't know. Schizophrenia, a lot we know, a lot we don't know. So there's some disorders have more definition than others. Anxiety, there appears to be a genetic vulnerability, so it tends to run in families, if you want to put it like that. But it has to then be combined with stress, either a situation stress, a traumatic life event, or some vague and undefined causes. Sometimes people just can't tell you, they just don't adapt well in the world. So there's likely a genetic contribution that reveals your inability to cope with and adapt in stressful situations of some sort that then shows up as a disorder, and in a lot of unusual ways, as you'll see. The major mediators in the central nervous system, your major mediators, our old friend, serotonin, norepinephrine, and GABA, the inhibitory transmitter. But serotonin, if y'all didn't know by now, it wouldn't take a rocket science to figure it out. Serotonin is pretty important. And I think when you go back to what we said last week when I gave you that permissive theory, that permissive hypothesis, that serotonin might be the regulator neurotransmitter, and that if its levels are adequate, then other neurotransmitter levels are regulated by it, so that it's kind of like your governor, for your engine. And when your serotonin levels are inadequate, everything can go haywire in ways that we don't expect in different parts of the brain, creating different types of behaviors, that we would have. So serotonin is big, and you will see today that a lot of treatments are serotonin based, if we're going to use the pharmacotherapy. Then also norepinephrine and GABA. The major peripheral mediator for anxiety disorders is the sympathetic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, peripherally, sympathetic specifically, shaking, sweating, pounding heart rate, butterflies on the inside, all of those feelings. Some of the manifestations of anxiety, these you will know because we've all experienced them in some way or another, just not to the pathological level. Restlessness or pacing, syncope, just faint. Has anybody ever been so afraid that they fainted? Okay, you have. It can happen, and you don't have to raise your hand. Some of these questions people don't want to admit. Have you been so afraid of something that you actually fainted? Okay, it can happen. Tachycardia, heart pounding away. Tingling in extremities, tremors, upset stomach, butterflies, nausea, queasiness, just don't feel settled down. Even urinary frequency, hesitancy, and urgency. If your heart rate goes up, what happens to your circulating blood volume? Goes up, you circulate more. If you circulate more at the level of the glomerulus, what happens? Form more pee. Form more pee, you gotta go pee. Okay, so when you're anxious like that, you can have more frequency. Other things, diarrhea, dizziness, lightheadedness, hyperhidrosis, hyperreflexia, hypertension, the three hypers, palpitations, pupillary mydriasis. Okay? You gotta get all the lighting here you need to see. Okay. The symptoms do vary according to the anxiety disorder, and it's always true, as I said a little bit earlier, the clinician has to rule out general medical or substance abuse conditions before being able to assign a DSM-5 diagnosis of an anxiety disorder. The history and the review of systems is essential. The history is 95% of it. What does Vanetta tell you all the time? You can talk to a patient, you can usually figure out what's wrong, and I think that is absolutely true. If you ask enough questions, and with these disorders you have to ask a lot of questions, then you can get really close to what the issue is, and then of course some lab will be needed to rule out things you don't want to overlook. But it's a lot of narrative involved in looking at these. There are a couple of in-office assessment tools. Some of these have already popped up earlier, the GAD-7 for anxiety severity, and then the OASIS. They actually mentioned these during the expert training, and these are actually good clinical tools. I gave you copies of both OASIS and GAD-7 in just as uploads, so you can look at them. I'm not going to ask you to remember all the questions. You might actually just kind of do them to see how you would respond to see what your score is. Of course, I don't know what a PA student's score is in the middle of a module. It's probably need to do before and after, because I think your score is going to be higher now, and then after the test is over, it goes down until the threat of the next class shows up. Okay, it's cyclic. And I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you because my life is the same way, it just runs these little stretches. But the GAD-7 will give you minimal, mild, moderate, and severe anxiety, and then OASIS, you gotta have a score of 8 or above to get clinically significant anxiety. They're allowing that there's some anxiety living. If you don't have anxiety living, I might even venture to say you're not that productive, because when you feel completely at ease and relaxed all the time, you usually not do anything. Anxiety and stress actually does help us get things done. Now, when you got too much of it, it doesn't help you get things done. You always have to assess for suicidal ideation in somebody who has an anxiety disorder, because if it's that extreme for them, sometimes it's so unpleasant physically and psychically that they just want it to go away. And they can't think of any other way to make it go away other than to be dead. Okay, look at all the toxic conditions. These are kind of agents, and this is not even a complete list of all the stuff that you put up here. Alcohol use or withdrawal. You would think alcohol use would actually settle you down, but actually it's a disinhibitor, so if there's a baseline reason to be worried, you might actually get more anxious, and certainly in withdrawal. Street drug use or withdrawal, amphetamines, cocaine, heroin, cannabis, okay, and do it with use and withdrawal. Sympathomimetic agents, pseudoephedrine, phenylephrine, vasopressor agents, dopamine, all of these things hype up your sympathetic nervous system in one way or another. Caffeine use or withdrawal, penicillin and sulfa drugs. Interestingly, some of the antibiotics that can get into the central nervous system can actually create anxiety disorders. It's not a common side effect, but you always have to think about when somebody shows up with new anxiety, what's new in the tank? What have we put in your body that hasn't ordinarily been in there? And use how it's a rule out based on time relationship. And then maybe withdrawal. Heavy metals, mercury, arsenic, other chemicals, phosphorus, organophosphates, if it doesn't kill you first, carbon sulfide, benzene, there's just a lot of things that can do it. Medical disorders, I don't need you to do laundry list of all these, but what I wanted to show you is that you just got disorders in almost every category. Neurological, look at all the things up there. Head trauma, cancer, stroke, subarachnoid hemorrhage, encephalitis, Huntington's disease, epilepsy, cardiac conditions. Sometimes it's the disease itself, sometimes it's the response to the disease, having it. Cardiac conditions, respiratory, endocrine, inflammatory, yeah.
Okay, so which one comes first? Is it the disease that's causing the anxiety, or is it the anxiety associated with the disease happening?
We don't know. I don't think it's a set thing all the time. I think some people do finally have a diagnosis and then start imagining what's going to happen to their life. You get a diagnosis of cancer and then you start thinking a future threat. Now, cancer might be a present threat, but it might be a future threat, what's going to happen to me, and then anxiety shows up. It cycles. I think they both breed it. I think some of the disorders create anxiety by the way they work in the body, and some it's your fault about what will it do to me. You're never going to sort them out. They don't sort well. Inflammatory disorders, deficiency states, other psychiatric disorders have anxiety. A lot of everything we talked about so far had anxiety of some manifestation. There were just other symptoms that zeroed in on diagnosis. And then a lot of miscellaneous conditions, systemic malignancies, PMS, febrile illnesses, chronic infections. So a lot of stuff can be happening. Okay. In terms of laboratory assessment, you're going to have a lot of other cues that make you think something. It's not going to just be that. There will be other things going on when you do your review of systems in your physical. If there's a low index of suspicion that anxiety is being produced by a medical disorder, then you can do some basic screens like CBC for infection, CMT for metabolic disorders, thyroid function test, UA, urine drug screen, rule out infection is indicated. You'll see urine drug screens in almost every psychiatric facility because they're always trying to get rid of causative agents as the problem. So you'll see that pretty commonly. Now, if there's a moderate to high index of suspicion that the anxiety is produced by some medical disorder, you might go bigger in what you're looking at. In this case, if you think CNS disorder, let's say you have focal neurologic symptoms or other parts of their story that makes you think, well, it could be this or it could be that. Then you might go further, EEGs, lumbar puncture, brain CTs, rule out cardiac disorders using EKG and stress tests. So the rest of the story will help you know where to go. The point of this is not to be in the dirt, here's what you need to do, but just to know that the whole story, high suspicion, low suspicion, how big do you get? Okay, any question about anxiety just as a general theme? Okay, let's look at separation anxiety disorder. Wow, okay. I'll tell you, when you're a parent, it will kill you when they start clinging to you like that. You don't want to hurt them. It'll be fine. Okay, DSM-5 criteria. And I've kind of highlighted in red some of the key turn points. Separation anxiety disorder is a developmentally inappropriate and excessive fear or anxiety concerning separation from those two individuals attached. Let's say you had a 7 or 8 year old and they'd been in daycare, but they still had never quite learned how to be away from the parent. So, go to first grade, second grade, and they're clinging and crying, and they can't function, and they need to go home, and they can't think all day. Well, that might be a separation anxiety disorder. Most children will figure it out, and they want to go play with their friends. So they might fuss with you to manipulate you one way or another, but it's not usually this. So this is a developmentally inappropriate and excessive fear. You have to have 3 of the following. They always give you a laundry list of things you can choose from. Excessive distress when anticipating separation. We're going to school now. Let's get in the car. Okay, it starts crying, not wanting to go to the car, pulling them to go out. Persistent excessive worry about losing attachment figure or harm to them. Now, I'm sure y'all did this because I used to think about this at a certain age. I used to worry that my parents would die. When you love your parents, you don't want anything bad to happen. And it wasn't a pathological thing, but I think everybody thinks at some point, what would happen if this person died? And then you kind of start worrying about what will happen, so you kind of think, and then you kind of dismiss it. You move on because, no, that's not going to happen. But you entertain it periodically, and you worry about it. But this would be excessive worry about losing the figure or that harm would come to them. Persistent excessive worry about future event. That is getting lost, being kidnapped, having an accident, becoming ill. They're thinking about stuff that hasn't happened, but they're talking about, but what if somebody steals me when I go to school? What if somebody does so-and-so to me? There's a persistent reluctance or refusal to go out, away from home, to school, work, or elsewhere because of fear of separation. And a persistent reluctance about being alone or without the attachment figure at home or elsewhere. I'm sure y'all know family situations where the children are you think they're too tight with their parents, and I think there is a healthy being with parents, and then there's also a healthy not being with the parents, and you kind of have to help them get there so they can be independent. Some parents, this is just kind of a segue, some parents so want their children because they have emotional anxiety issues that they kind of develop it in children. They can stay. You don't want to leave mommy, do you? Mommy wants you to be with her all the time. Be careful. Who knows what will happen. So that's a pathology in the relationship that probably could, who knows if it elicits it or conditions a child another way. Here's the others you can choose from of the 3. Persistent refusal to sleep away from home. They won't do overnights. Or to go to sleep without being near a major attachment figure. Repeated nightmares involving separation. Dreaming, waking up and telling you that I woke up and nobody was in the house and I was afraid. And then lots of physical complaints and symptoms. Okay, this fear or anxiety or avoidance, so it's all of those, fear, anxiety, or avoiding situations, has to last for at least 4 weeks in children and adolescents. And if it's an adult, it has to be 6 months or more. You'll usually see this in children. The length of time is shorter than for adults. It has to be longer. It has to persist for that length of time for it to rise to the level of a diagnosis. And the disability there has to be a lot of disability with the diagnosis, so they can't function well. Okay, separation anxiety disorder, any questions about that? Okay, it's pretty straightforward, you know that one. Okay, specific phobia, who's afraid of snakes? I understand them, and I'm not out to get them. But if I'm going down the road and a snake comes across the pathway, I'm freezing. I mean, it's in me. Now, would I go handle one? No. I was down in Bricktown, when we did our staycation, we were in Bricktown, and we were walking along, and there was a woman out there by that fountain in front of the theater, the movie theater, and she had a long snake wrapped around her neck and was playing with it, and people were coming up and talking. It was kind of an attention getter because she wasn't doing a show or anything. She just standing there with a snake, and I thought, you got something wrong with you too. And there were people who were getting back, and then there were some people who wanted to touch that snake, and I thought, I'm not even going over there. You stay on that side of the fountain. I don't need that snake. Who's afraid of spiders? Spiders don't like spiders. Dr. Latassi cannot stand spiders. I mean, not stand them. If I threw a little plastic spider on her, it's fun. I've done it before. Oh gosh. And her roommate in college, she was so afraid of spiders, she would roll up paper and beat them, spray them with insecticide, beat them again. And one time, Nancy took a series of pictures of this whole spider on the windowsill, and this friend of hers got fly swatters and paper and beat it. And then we had a final picture of this squashed up little greasy spot on the windowsill. It's like, it's dead, and now you're still beating it, and you're spraying dead. So make sure it doesn't come back. Okay. But specific phobias can definitely happen. Okay. Marked fear or anxiety about a specific object or a situation. It doesn't have to be a thing, it can be a situation. So, afraid of flying, afraid of heights. How many of you are afraid of heights? Okay. I'm actually, it's a little bit. If I'm up there, I like being up, I like to get up high and see stuff. But then if you get near the edge, you could fall, then that's kind of scary. So I do have a little pause about that. It kind of makes me a little bit anxious. Animals, no, I'm not afraid of animals unless it's a snake. Receiving injection doesn't bug me a bit. You will have patients who will not agree to a therapy that's a shot. Will not. Now, diabetes is the class where that would be looked at. You have to condition people to get over that. I have them, and I'll ask them as soon as I first see them, tell me about how you think about injections. Tell me about insulin for you. And just to figure out what the story is, and I'll talk to them and work with them over a period of months before we actually get to anything like that. Because some people will not do it. Seeing blood, okay? Your healthcare provider, you probably need to move on. He's going to see somewhere. Okay. The phobic object or situation provokes immediate fear or anxiety. It's not like wind up, you see it and you just get very anxious about it. The object or situation actively avoided or endured with intense fear or anxiety. Like some people get on a plane, they drink before they go on the plane, they drink while they're on the plane, they're sitting there clinging to the seats. If you have any bump or turbulence, you're thinking my life is over, and they might start grabbing people, just grab. I had a woman sat by me on a plane one time, and we did have some turbulence. And I didn't like it either. It's like I'm not ready to die from an airplane crash. It was making me nervous too. And she reached over, it's like, oh my God. Stop it. I got fingernail marks in my arm. But she was scared to death. She was enduring it with intense fear and anxiety. And I would say hers was fear because it was operating in the present moment. Now the fear and anxiety, it's out of proportion to the danger. Okay, if there's a king cobra in that corner, That's not, I don't like snakes, but that's stupid to go over there and get near the king cobra. They'll bite you and kill you. So that fear is healthy. Okay, now if somebody said, oh, I like snakes, let me go pick him up. That's a fool. You know, it's like, think about it. It's like cobra, you could be dead. Okay. The fear, anxiety, or avoidance causes clinically significant distress in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. The fear, anxiety, or avoidance is persistent, typically for 6 months or more. Again, your key feature for a lot of these things for adults, again, is 6 months or more of it. I don't know why they all got together and decided that, but they decided. And so, if an object or situation, specific phobia is pretty common, 7 to 9%. The phobia sometimes develops following a traumatic event. Let's say they were bitten by a dog, you know, or they were stuck in an elevator, so now they have a fear of this. Observation of others going through a traumatic event, like watching somebody drown and you would never want to be in the water again. Or it could be informational transmission. Now look at this, extensive media coverage of a plane crash and now a person's afraid to fly. And you know, with media being what it is now, things are, you can get a feel of things like we never did in the past. Like growing up, it was always one newscast. There were like 3 networks. Seriously, ABC, CBS, and NBC. That was it where we grew up there. And that was pretty much it for everybody in the 60s and 70s. Then when cable showed up, late 70s, early 80s, then it was like multiple channels. So you could see stuff. We mostly had to read the paper, or the people on the news would tell you what it was, and they wouldn't even be graphic because back then they wouldn't tell you everything about what was going on. So you just imagined it. Now, you can go on there and click and you can see somebody being beheaded somewhere in real time. It's like, oh gosh, it's just terrible things can be seen. So the phobia can happen after an event, watching a terrible event for somebody else, or just any coverage of an activity. However, a lot of people are unable to recall it. Like, why are you afraid of snakes? I don't know if a snake crawled through my crib. You know, I don't think so, but it's hard to know. Some of it could just be parents. If they're afraid of snakes, when you're a little bitty kid, remember what's going on, they're saying, get back, get back. They just teach you about things to be afraid of. So you learn it, and it's like, okay, I'm not messing with that. Most specific phobias are known before the age of 10. Most. Okay. Let's see something here. Yeah. Okay, we got, and then treatments of specific phobias. It's really not a medicine treatment. It's a behavioral treatment, and there's a couple of behavioral treatments, and these will show up for a lot of other anxiety disorders too. Exposure therapy is what they call it. It's a behavioral therapy where they do systematic desensitization of the thing that bothers you. Or they use the term flooding. Sometimes you put the person around the thing a lot so that they can see it and understand it and work through and talk about and reframe how their mind conceptualizes that thing. An example would be treatment of a spider phobia in a 2-hour session. The patient gradually exposed spiders. Might be pictures of spiders, might be video clips of spiders. Then maybe they have spiders in jars, just things that you can see. Booster sessions are recommended so that people can keep encountering what it is that is so fearful to them that they can't function real well in life. Hypnosis has been used, relaxation techniques, family and supportive psychotherapy so that everybody knows how to help that person deal with it. Medications, only anxiolytic therapies like Valium is not the one you see used much more, but Ativan, Xanax, things like that. Only for severe cases, and then only temporarily. You wouldn't want somebody getting addicted to an anxiolytic or dependent on it simply as a treatment for a specific phobia. You would try to help them get beyond the phobia. So it's a behavioral technique. We're not going to get into the details of cognitive behavioral therapy because it really isn't the scope of what a PA would do, but you need to know that the treatment for it is from someone who does cognitive behavioral therapy. It could be a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but you would want to know, okay, you see this, here's how you go ahead and deal with it. Now I've got a video clip. This is a specific phobia. When you see who this person is, they're afraid of dogs, and it's afraid of pit bulls. But in this case, this man freaks out over a pit bull puppy. And then, so the first thing is they're doing the therapeutic part, then it comes back and gives you a little bit of the backstory about what happened with him. This is from Animal Planet. So let me show you this.
All three of the harmful foods I'm going to show you right now are labeled and marketed as health.
It's now time for Marvin's exposure, and I'm really worried about the next level for him.
So, as you can see, we are here in the beautiful Golden Gate Dog Park. You don't go to parks, do you? Why not?
No,
Why?
they're dog friendly.
Well, that sounds like a good thing.
To you, not to me.
Okay.
This exposure is going to bring up a lot of pain and memories from the past.
Oh, hell no.
Hey.
This pit bull puppy comes on a corner. My heart, like, almost jumped out of my body.
Stay with me. Stay with me. You're okay. You're okay. Stay with me. Let's do this together. You're good. You're in control. You're backing up. You're running from your fear. We'll let the dog get closer to you, but I don't want you to back up. This dog represents 40 years of being in pain. So can I let the dog come closer? Okay, you tell her when to stop. I'm gonna let you tell her, okay? All right. Good, good, good. There's the dog, okay? Go ahead and come a little bit closer. Okay, think of your family who is not going to want you to suffer. I think you should pet the dog.
He knows, he's looking at me. No.
Marvin, come on, Marvin.
Ooh.
Think of your girls. Think of your girls. Think of your girls.
You're a coward.
You're not a coward. You are not a coward. You are a strong person. You're not a coward, Marvin.
I close my eyes and I go back in time, like where I was when I was 5 years old.
This is why you're confronting your fear, because you can't keep living like this. You can't keep living in shared terror. Enough is enough.
Babies.
I know.
With my babies.
I know.
So much.
You cannot leave being afraid still. I know you're going to be scared, but you have to touch the dog before you leave. I'm sorry. Walk up to the dog.
This is exposure therapy.
Let's see you shaking.
Oh my God.
Look at you.
Dogs don't fear, they go after fear.
I know it's tough, but you're moving forward. You're regaining your life.
Dog can't come inside here. No. Hey, you can't bring that dog inside here. Pet bull gotta go. Take it somewhere else. I don't give a pet bulls and me don't get along. My name is Marvin Cruz. I'm 47 years of age. I'm terrified of pit bulls. My phobia started about maybe 5, 6 years old. My neighbor from like 2 doors down came over and we were playing in the yard, playing ball. This pit bull came in the backyard and was growling like crazy. It attacked my neighbor, arms, legs, back, chest, I mean everywhere. He had over 1,000 stitches on his body. Ever since then, you know, if I see a pit bull, I'm ice cold, I'm frozen, I can't move. Baby, see anything out there? It's good?
Yeah, honey, it's clear.
You sure?
When we go for walks, we don't go far. We like stay around, and my dad, if he does walk with us, we'll use a 4-wheeler.
Just looking at him, he looks like he's crazy. But when it comes to the pit bulls, he'll just freeze up like a little baby.
My kids, on their birthday, my wife took them to the park. I'm at home. I went to the park's sad, you know. It's a shop that I should have been in. My kids' friends are always saying, "Where's your dad? Do you have a dad?" He's never here. And it hurts. It hurts a lot. Cheers. I need his treatment to get back to life again, to get back to reality.
Oh, shoot.
We're on side 29.
Okay. Let's take a break. But just, you see that, this man, 40 years, okay, he met diagnostic criteria, there was an animal, and he had almost every one of those symptoms that you could have, and it certainly did affect his function. But what he did all was avoidant behavior, and did you see his physical response when that dog got near? See, I love this dog, I was like, I want to pick him up and play with him. And he remembered, he had that traumatic event, and so to him, that represented death, danger, okay? It's big time scary. Okay, let's take a break. We'll